Welcome everyone. There you go. I'd like to welcome everyone to this year's Illinois Innovation Index, focused on R&D, brought to you by the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition. My name is Colleen Egan, and I am the President and CEO of ISTC. The Illinois Science and Technology Coalition has been measuring, connecting, and advocating for the state's innovation economy for over 30 years. We do this through our mission of IDEA: innovation, data, education, and advocacy. Through innovation programming, which is usually from entrepreneurial support to corporate and startup connection, to data, which of course includes our Innovation Index and a host of other index reports we release throughout the year. Education for our programming through STEM education K-12, from classroom to the real world, and advocacy and policy support that we support here in Illinois and in DC. Some of our larger programs, which you may or may not know, I'll start with Venture Engine. Venture Engine was launched last year. It is a startup and corporate connection platform and a program. We support our startups throughout the year with showcases, workshops, and summits. In our education team, our flagship program, the STEM Challenge, creates opportunities for students and corporate partner mentors to work on real-world problems. Our mentor matching engine is an online collaboration tool which matches students to mentors from across the world. This year, our largest year, we have almost 800 projects on our mentor matching engine. And I look forward to seeing many of you at our STEM Challenge Showcase and our Student Research Showcase in the spring. Our 6x3 project is just what it says: 6 weeks, 3 partners in impact programming. Last year, we created this pilot. It was such a success. We're bringing it back this year in 2 iterations. This year, it'll be our education team on a STEM challenge, the gray matter experience with entrepreneurship for teaching for students, and Code Nation, so they can code a solution to their solution. And last but not least, our teacher externship program, the first formal program of its kind in the state, placing teachers in corporate environments to learn what that company does and to see what they're looking for in their next round of talent. We work with students as they navigate their high school career into college, and then hopefully set them up for success in their future careers. Some of our publications that you may or may not be aware of is our weekly Spark, which is a curated newsletter, our Researchers to Know event, which we do every year, which highlights the success of research from across the state, our State of Innovation podcast, our Catalyst Conversations, which is a monthly newsletter, deep dive interview with someone leading innovation throughout the state. Our Index Insights is a member only look at problems that the state is facing or topics that our members would like to see. And of course, our Illinois Innovation Index. The Illinois Innovation Index, we usually do in 3 parts. We look at university entrepreneurship, research and development, which we're doing today, and the talent supply for STEM. I am so honored to be here today with all of our speakers, starting with our keynote, our sponsor speaker, our moderator, and panelists that you can hear today. We've got a great group of people, and I can't wait to get to the panel discussion later. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Horizon, the Illinois Institute of Technology, and Rosalind Franklin University. I'd also like to thank our members and our funders throughout the state. Our work would not be possible without you. So it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce Michael Rosen from Rosalind Franklin University, the Managing Director of IRP and the Helix Incubator. Thank you, Michael, for joining us here today.
Colleen, thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you all, and it's an honor to represent Rosalind Franklin on this great annual event. I'd like to just very briefly kind of highlight some of the entrepreneurial activities and research that are going on at Rosalind Franklin up in Lake County. And I'm briefly going to touch on our new innovation and research park and our Helix 51 incubator. And my focus will be in these brief comments on biomedical innovation in Lake County. Next slide, please. So Lake County, for those of you who don't know, is actually the largest bioscience cluster in the Midwest, with over 122 bioscience companies and 33,000 bioscience jobs. And actually, if you go between Chicago and Milwaukee, there's not a lot of wet lab research space available for companies. So we actually not only cover the zone between downtown Chicago and the northernmost suburbs, but also up to Milwaukee area. And all of these companies here are just some of the companies that are in the region. I won't go over them all, but they're all well-known names to you. Next slide, please. So when we look at Rosalind Franklin as a regional innovation hub, it's the only medical school. As you know, Chicago has 6 medical schools. 4 of which are downtown, one is which is in the western suburbs, but we're the only one in Lake County. And the goal of the university is to really serve as a hub for licensing and business development of technology. Our Helix 51 incubator is a place for startup activities. We're fostering, obviously, industry partnerships in a number of ways. With our Innovation Research Park, we're looking to create partner co-location to actually share research going on at the university, and whether it be in the university's Institute for Brain Science and Brain Diseases, to our Center for Genetic Diseases, our Center for Proteomics, our Center for Cancer Cell Biology, Immunology, Infection, et cetera. But it's also a place, obviously, with our 6 schools, it's a place of student education and a talent pool for industry. We have 2,200 students all in a graduate level from the Chicago Medical School, our College of Pharmacy, our new College of Nursing, and the Scholl School of Podiatric Medicine. Next slide, please. In our Helix 51 incubator, which now has eight companies, we are focusing on a variety of diseases. Cancer is obviously one predominant therapy, and we have three companies focused on different aspects of cancer therapy. We've got a number of companies looking at cardiac diseases and the implications for cardiology. We've got a number of companies looking at infectious diseases, both from a diagnostic and treatment perspective. And then finally, we have a company looking at a host of fibrotic diseases such as NASH, scleroderma, and diabetic kidney disease. Next slide, please. We also opened up recently the Innovation and Research Park. Our first 2 tenants include SHIELD of Illinois. So SHIELD, as you know, is the University of Illinois' network for COVID testing around the state. The SHIELD organization has 7, if you can back up one. Yes, thank you. So SHIELD has 7 sites around the state. The SHIELD site at the Innovation and Research Park is the northernmost outpost and covers northern Cook County and Lake County. And SHIELD is testing, or has the capability of testing, I think, up to 13,000 COVID tests a day. And their focus is kindergarten through 12th grade school systems throughout northern Cook County and Lake County. Inspirotech is a spin-out from Abbott Labs that is focused on a unique sensor for testing for pathogens and allergens, including COVID as a pathogen, in homes, hospitals, offices, et cetera. And we're building out this year the rest of the wet lab space in the IRP, about 25,000 square feet. Fortunately, due to the Illinois Department of Commerce's wet lab grant that came in the latter part of last year, and that will bring needed capabilities for, you can't do research these days without wet lab space, and it's very expensive. And so thanks to the Illinois Department of Commerce, we're able to complete out an additional 25,000 square feet of wet lab space in Lake County for additional industry purposes. Next slide, please. And so hopefully in a few minutes, I've been able to cover some of the biomedical innovation that is happening in Lake County. And we encourage you to come up and visit us and see what's going on. And hopefully we're representing the northernmost activities of biomedical research going on in the state. So thank you again, Colleen, and the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you so, Michael. I was so excited about your talk that I was hot fingering your slides, so I apologize for that. But I want to thank you also to Rosalind Franklin has been such a big supporter of Illinois Science and Technology Coalition, and I look forward to what we can do in 22 and for the rest of my tenure here at ISTC. So thank you very much. It is my pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker from the Illinois Institute of Technology, Dr. Raj Eshambati. We are so honored to have him here today, and he won't have any slides today, but he'll just be doing his speech. I love doing speeches without slides as well, so I'm excited. And Raj, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Colleen. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for this invitation. And at the outset, I want to thank the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition for doing some amazing work, and more importantly, convening this group of experts, thought leaders, and innovators to celebrate and spotlight what you do in terms of transforming innovations for the benefit of humanity. And of course, I'm honored. I'm a new president at the Illinois Institute of Technology. I'm now 7 months old, and prior to this, my academic journey went through the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So I'm not new to the Midwest, but I'm excited about this opportunity at Illinois Tech because, as you know, we are a comprehensive technology-based institution that was founded in 1890 on a very noble purpose. In what has become known as the $1 Million Sermon, Minister Frank Wakely Gonzalez, when he was talking to his church congregation, expressed an aspiration to educate people from all walks of life, the children of Chicago's meat packers, steel workers, and machinists, so that they can become impactful leaders in modern industrial society and become engineers and architects and physicists. For over 131 years, we have provided affordable and accessible education, and we have lived up to that founding promise. We are #2 in the country, according to a recent Georgetown study, in terms of the Pell Grant recipients at our school. But as importantly, we are #1 in the state of Illinois in moving people from the bottom 20th percentile to the top 20th percentile. We are #1 in terms of the occupational learning power, #1 in Chicago in terms of occupational learning power. So we have lived up to our promise as being an opportunity engine. But beyond teaching, we engage in relevance-inspired research, and that has resulted in game-changing innovations and breakthrough technologies. Our people have been involved in some of the best cutting-edge innovations of the past century, including cell phone, barcode, microgrid, that undergirds the green economy and as importantly, Amazon Alexa. But what we offer today is as relevant as it was in 1890. And as you know, given that technologies are changing the way we live, we work, and we learn, and given the fact that these breakthrough technologies are interwoven in every job, the nature of interactions between employees and enterprises is actually changing. Which leads me to the point. So far, I've talked about technologies, but technology, as an old academic paper states, is neither good nor evil. Powered by human ingenuity, technologies actually transform into innovation that benefit humanity. Let's take a case in point. In 1800, the life expectancy in the United States was 40 years. Today, it is close to 80 years. In the past 120 years, the life expectancy in South Korea has quadrupled, while the life expectancy in India is about 3 times what it was about 120 years. A 5-year-old child in 1850 could expect to live till 55, whereas today, the 5-year-old child can expect to live till 82, a 27-year differential, if you will, over a 170-year period. And that has all happened because of innovation, because of our innovations in healthcare that have actually changed human life. But look at our own lifetimes in the last 40, 50 years. Personal computers, cell phones, digital devices, social technology, social networking. By every conceivable measure involving productivity and comfort, we are today better than we were, say, 100, 50, or even 20 years ago. And that is possible because of innovation, because innovation is the engine to human progress through breakthrough ideas, to commercializing breakthrough ideas. And as importantly, innovation is a message of hope. So what is in store for the future? I'm confident that our lives will get better in the next 20 to 50 years, despite all the uncertainties that we are facing today. And that is why I am very impressed with the kind of work that you are doing with your innovation index, because as you know, innovation happens in multiple levels. Nations have to be innovative. This is why you're finding that nations have innovation policies now. States and cities have to be innovative. When you think about the great cities of the 20th century, when you think about Boston, Chicago, Rochester, Pittsburgh, Detroit, San Francisco, all of them were innovative cities fundamentally because they developed an ecosystem. They had great universities, or they have great universities, incredible companies, thriving entrepreneurial culture, and a government that supports innovation. Of course, innovation happens at a firm level as well, as epitomized by some of the mega companies, the growth of the mega companies that we have seen in the last 20, 30 years, Google, eBay, Amazon, and Netflix, and stuff like that. But there is one very important thing that we need to understand as a society. For all the greatness of innovations, for cities and companies to be innovative, we need continuous investment in technology, continuous investments in innovation, and because otherwise, as Schumpeter talks about in his creative destruction thesis, new entrants that offer new value come in and upend incumbents. And we see a lot of cities that are shells of their former selves because they did not invest in terms of innovation. We see the same thing with iconic companies like Polaroid, Blockbuster, Borders, Kodak, that have actually gone out of existence. And so at the end of the day, to me, it boils down to a very fundamental question. Is our human talent balance sheet better than other entities that we are competing in? Does our human talent have the innovative capacity to continually improve and be at the frontier? And that's a very important question. So how do we ensure a talent differential that is positive, and ensures that we have innovative capacities as a state, as a city, as institutions, so that we can continue this march of human progress. And this is where higher education plays a significant part. My view of higher education is that we are talent studios. We source incredible talent from around the world, and we bring them in and educate them to become impactful leaders. But we, higher education in the US, we do not let affordability actually be a constraint. And that is our biggest service to society. But as I think about the future, the rapid advances in technologies, there is likely to be a mismatch between the skill sets of today and the skill sets of tomorrow. Here are some salient factoids for you. 65% of tomorrow's jobs don't exist. The individuals, particularly those in the millennial mindset, are going to have shorter tenures with firms and are likely to have 12 to 15 jobs over their lifetime. This, coupled with the fact that the half-life of technology education today is 5 years, implies there are incredible reskilling and upskilling opportunities for the future, which is going to be important to have a thriving economy. When you think about people coming into the workforce, there is grave danger that millions of jobs are going to remain unfilled because they do not have the educational requirements. And last but not the least, if we don't, as a society, look forward to the future and try to ensure that we educate all people, there is a likelihood that the digital divide is going to get exacerbated and long-run social inequity will get widened. So let me give you some numbers. In the last 3 years, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, 40% of Black-owned businesses, 32% of Latinx-owned businesses, 26% of Asian-owned businesses, and 25% of women-owned businesses have shuttered. 2 million women have thought about either pausing or staggering their career. Extreme poverty worldwide has increased for the first time after years of decline, etc. So what is the answer to all these numbers that I talked about? The answer fundamentally is with higher education, because we, in higher education, we need to educate our students and learners in order to become impactful leaders for the new economy by being market-driven and understanding what the market needs. And for that to happen, we need to change. We need to move education from the 19th century to the 21st century. Change is the only answer, and status quo is not an option. And so, to me, as I think about the future of Illinois Institute of Technology, I think of two things. One, to move from just being in the business of degrees to being in the business of educational experiences. This is not to say 4-year degrees are not important. This is to say that we need to start thinking about a portfolio of products that actually range from short-term certificates to long-form degrees. And this is extraordinarily important because an innovative higher educational institution is going to be the bedrock for an innovative economy. Critically, as opposed to the creative destruction of Schumpeter, I think we need to engage in creative construction, wherein we bring in multiple entities, including industry partners, 2-year community colleges, 4-year colleges, and of course, the government in order to train for the future. So what does this entail? To me, there are 3 things that higher education should look towards. One, we need to collaborate with 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, liberal arts colleges, and of course, co-create with our industry partners in terms of creating cutting-edge curricula and, as importantly, market-driven programs. Number 2, we need to reject the artificial silos between academic projects and work projects and incorporate learning in the flow of work. Because for far too long, higher education has embarked on a one-size-fits-all policy. With the emergent world of the digital economy, where there is a convergence of the physical, digital, and the biological spheres, we need to relax this assumption. And last but not the least, we need scale. We need to unbundle education so that we have short form modules that stack into bigger and better credentials. And what I'm talking about is not science fiction. When I was at the University of Illinois, we did these things in the Gies Business School. And so the templates are already there, and the University of Illinois has done extraordinarily well in terms of cutting edge digital education, if you will. So in summary, in closing, I'm extraordinarily proud of the fact that we at Illinois Tech are embarked on several of these initiatives so that we can supply the right kind of innovative talent to our already thriving economy. And I hope to work with industry partners, other colleges, and the government in order to create a joint future full of limitless possibilities. And I look forward to working with all of you in order to execute this exciting vision. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to following your work. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashambati. I love that you mentioned hope, because in a lot of the work we do, hope is all we have, right? And innovation is making the impossible possible. And I think if we've got more people believing in this, I know a lot of people make fun of me sometimes, like, oh, hope and impossibilities, but that's all we have. And that's how we create a better future. I'm so glad that you brought up education too. We started at a very early age, K through 12, really preparing our students to be the future innovators, the future entrepreneurs of tomorrow. And so this is a collective effort by everyone on this call and everyone in our ecosystem. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Colin.
Before we start, Illinois, universities in the innovation community not only survived, but in many cases thrived during the COVID-19 pandemic, exhibiting resiliency while adapting to meet the challenges and opportunities of a new era. The impact of developments in therapeutics, diagnostics, and medical research at Illinois' leading academic health centers, universities, federal labs, and innovative companies underscore that there has been never been a more important time for research and scientific discovery. Yet these groups, we find, still face headwinds in areas where further investment and support can help ensure our future success. The 2022 Illinois Science and Technology Coalition Research and Development Index reveals some critical areas that have been hard hit by the pandemic, but it also showcases the tenacity that permeates through many of these key sectors. Over the past decade, commercialization at Illinois universities has strengthened. The COVID-19 has not supported that upward trend. Over the past decade, commercialization at Illinois University has strengthened, and COVID-19 has not stopped that upward trend in performance. Meanwhile, Illinois businesses have found ways to thrive despite having to completely reimagine what our work life looks like. R&D matters more now than ever before, and ISTC has for decades been a champion for the Illinois innovation community, highlighting community successes and working to support collaborations across the research spectrum of private and public sector partners. This index contains summary statistics from published data sources for R&D activity that precede the onset of the pandemic and some recently updated. The index also includes recent success stories and examples from Illinois industry investments, universities, federal labs, and collaborations between partners, including impactful innovations during the pandemic. The complete index will be available for your review after today's event and on our website later this week. Now I'd like to introduce Austin Green, our lead data intern who is working towards his master's degree in political science at the University of Illinois Springfield. and was an integral team member in the collection and presentation of this data. This is his first innovation index with us. We're proud to have Austin as an intern with us for 2 years, and I'd like to call Austin to the screen.
Thanks so much, Colleen, and I'm so happy to see everyone here today. I just wanted to quickly introduce myself and then get into the data. My name's Austin Green. I'm a graduate student at UIS, as Colleen mentioned, and I'm a data intern here for ISTC. It's great to see all of you here, and it's great to be meeting you all virtually. This, as mentioned, this is our first R&D index since 2020. And it's clear that R&D has life-saving applications, just as Dr. Eshambati talked about in his keynote. Innovation improves life expectancy, and this is true now more than ever. At ISTC, we like to say that R&D is the lifeblood of innovation, which has never been more true than in the times we are living through. And this displays some of the silos that we were talking about. It's clear that businesses participate in the R&D process to drive revenue, to push the envelope, and to make impactful changes to compete in a global marketplace. Universities participate to advance our understanding of science, and universities have increasingly become engrossed in the commercialization process as well. Argonne and Fermi, Illinois' 2 FFRDCs, both attempt to keep the state on the cutting edge of scientific discovery and deep tech. And then in industry and university collaborations, which is the meshing of all of these worlds, they combine the knowledge of business insiders with the talent available in Illinois' laboratories and colleges. Next slide, please. This is the layout of the R&D roadmap in the state. And as has been mentioned, this is just my first year at the helm of the data collection process for the index. So this road has been paved for me by my predecessors. And in saying that, this graphic should be familiar to those of you who have been at this release in the past. New in the R&D index for this year is some financial information about individual companies, a dense and comprehensive community news section that complements the data within the issue, and an academic focus on the motivation behind those industry-university partnerships. The roadmap pictured here features business R&D, higher education R&D, and R&D activity at federal labs, all of which interact to form the backbone of the state's innovation economy. The National Science Foundation provides data on each of these categories, delineated by state and by institution. Next slide, please. Illinois' business community is extremely active, and they have helped push the state forward in overall R&D, which sits at $18.25 billion for 2019, a $1.1 billion increase over the previous year's data. U.S. average increases in total R&D slightly outpaced Illinois' growth over the last 5 years. This is partially due to a drop in federal support to businesses who were performing R&D activities in Illinois. This loss has been considerable over the last 3 years, from $768 million in 2017 to $84 million in federal support in 2019. Illinois ranked 8th in total activity not so long ago in 2016, but this year fell to 10th due to the growth of some rival states like Pennsylvania and New Jersey over the last 5 years. This $1.1 billion increase, however, since 2018 is nothing to look down on, and we will see which industries played heavily into this rise in just a moment. Next slide, please. This is our inputs and outputs flowchart, and we know that businesses primarily use investment dollars to create new patents to improve products or to even improve their business's internal functioning. Our inputs and outputs chart is intended to show that relationship. Illinois had the 9th most overall business investment in R&D at $14.1 billion in 2019, as mentioned. Science and engineering jobs are up from years prior to 270,460. These are people making everyday contributions to the creation of strong research and new business patents. Speaking of patents, Illinois businesses were awarded over 7,000 patents in 2019. And in 2020, according to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, over the last 5 years, Illinois businesses have filed for more patents than ever before, about 4.4% more in each year since 2016, in fact. Next slide, please. Illinois business R&D activity, as mentioned in the previous slide briefly, sat at $14.1 billion in 2019, putting the state 9th overall, above North Carolina and below Pennsylvania. This represents an increase of $950 million between 2018 and 2019 for Illinois in this category, a big step forward for Illinois businesses. This activity by businesses makes up 78% of the grand total of R&D activity in the state. Illinois' 2.65% annual growth over the last 5 years has been outpaced by some big leaps for the United States as a whole of about 8.5% on average over the last 5 years. Business R&D intensity, which is a measure of R&D as a percentage of the total industry output for a state, is about the same in Illinois as it has been at the national level. And Illinois improved on this measure between 2018 and 2019, moving from 1.65% in intensity to 1.76% in intensity in 2019. In-house expenditures, which are those business R&D expenditures supplied by the business itself and not from an external source like another business, a federal grant-making body, or other gifts in the form of government subsidies, reached 94.8% in 2019. This makes Illinois second in the top 10 states for business R&D activity by those that have financed solely from within the companies themselves. Next slide, please. This is an industry by industry breakdown of R&D activity in Illinois. And a quick note on these industry by industry breakdowns is that this data includes only those expenditures that were made in-house by businesses in Illinois. As with just about every other top 10 state in the business R&D activities category, the pharmaceutical industry leads the way in Illinois, with just over $5 billion being contributed by Illinois pharmaceutical and chemical manufacturers like AbbVie, Horizon, and many others. Illinois is among the leaders in R&D in each of these sectors off to the left. In food tech, led by the efforts of ADM, Mondelez, and Kraft Heinz, and many others, Illinois moved to first overall in 2019, with Illinois businesses contributing more than most other states' businesses combined. Illinois is also a national leader in medical equipment and supplies due to the efforts of Baxter, Abbott, and others, as well as in machining, where Caterpillar, Deere, ITW, and several other Illinois companies are pushing Illinois' already vibrant innovation economy forward. Illinois is 5th in pharmaceutical manufacturing and 10th in computer and electronic production. Semiconductor technology research and development, which is a subcategory of the computer and electronic products category listed to the left, reached a new high in Illinois in 2019 at $73 million, ranking 20th overall among all states. And we will likely see an increase over the next few years as new data comes out regarding semiconductor production in the state. Next slide, please. U.S. spending on ag tech and food tech actually dropped over the last 5 years by about 4.1%, as you can see off to the left, while Illinois businesses increased their expenditures by 26.1% annually since 2015. Businesses in the machine manufacturing field, hampered by high materials costs and tariffs, saw their R&D total fall from 2015 to 2019 by about 6.5% annually here in the state. Illinois outpaced the national growth rate over the last 5 years in a couple of key industry areas where Illinois ranks highly. In electrical equipment and component manufacturing R&D, Illinois outpaced the U.S. average by 10% annually. In transportation equipment, by more than 3% annually. And in medical equipment and supplies, research by industry leaders in Illinois set new records in 2019 and outpaced nearly every other U.S. state. Illinois' growth has outpaced U.S. growth in this category by more than 40% over the last 5 years annually. Next slide, please. As mentioned, patents filed by businesses numbered over 7,000 both in 2019, and this increased again in 2020 by about 50 to 7,085 overall. Here's a listing of the top 25 businesses who filed patents in Illinois in 2020. Clearly, Caterpillar's nearly $2 billion in R&D activity across the state was an important mechanism for the growth of patent production overall. This was especially true in Illinois, where Caterpillar led the way in business patents awarded, as you can see here, with about 304 being awarded to Caterpillar's researchers. Several representatives from industries in Illinois are shown to the left as well, including fintech companies, electrical component manufacturers, wireless communication innovators, and of course, many companies from the machine manufacturing industry. Next slide, please. This is another one of those input and output graphs, and an important to the university research landscape. And in 2020, universities in the state performed nearly $2.7 billion worth of R&D in Illinois. This represents an increase of just over $500 million since 2019. And while increases were substantial overall in both 2019 and in 2020, the US rate has also risen substantially, and Illinois remains in 10th as it did in fiscal year 2016 for this category. In some areas, Illinois universities have had to overcome budgetary constraints. This is due to declines in both state and local investments in research, a metric which has decreased 4.3% annually since 2016, and in nonprofit research investments, where there has been a loss of about 0.3% annually since 2016. Nearly 40,000 professionals in Illinois perform the work that helps lead to the outputs listed below, and they helped create 302 patents across the universities in Illinois in 2019. Patents to Illinois universities have been steadily increasing since 2016 by about 9.2% annually, outpacing US growth overall, leading to a 1% increase in the rankings displayed on the bottom of this graph. The significant drop off of licensing income in the state, we think, is primarily due to the drop in licensing revenue at Northwestern, with Pfizer's Lyrica losing its patent protection in 2015. Next slide, please. In 2020, universities in the state, both public and private, performed nearly $2.7 billion worth of R&D in Illinois, as mentioned. This represented the 10th highest total nationally and was a record year for research at Illinois universities. Private and public universities perform roughly equal amounts of research activity within the state. The only other state within the top 10 in total higher education R&D activity that has even splits between public and private is Washington. Most of that $2.7 billion in Illinois was supplied by the federal government, as is the case nationally. And in Illinois, the federal government supplied about 53.5% of all expenditures made at colleges on R&D activity. Illinois was slightly outpaced by US growth between 2016 and 2020 in university R&D activity, with activity in the state increasing 3.6% annually compared to the US's overall average rate of increase of 4.7% annually since 2016. And as mentioned, because of some decreases in state and local funding over the last 5 years, universities have had to shore up their budgets by looking to other sources of funding for research, like businesses and federal grant-making institutions. Illinois has 14 universities in the top 500 in university R&D activity in the US overall. Next slide, please. This is a breakdown of research funding by sector, and as you can see, life sciences leads the way as far as which sectors the majority of research is being done in, with 57.5% of national higher education R&D being performed in life sciences. And in Illinois, that total sits at 61.3%. This forms a nice complement and a pipeline of sorts to the business R&D industry leaders within the pharmaceutical space. The sector known as Other Sciences in the Business Enterprise Research and Development Annual Survey released by the National Science Foundation is actually a catch-all category that includes R&D on projects that are interdisciplinary or can't be constrained to one category or another. And Illinois saw a record year in the amount of funding on said projects of $56 million across each university in the state. Next slide, please. Oh, previous slide, my bad. And I'm sorry, we're going on growth rates, my bad. Next slide. As mentioned, interdisciplinary research is on the rise in Illinois, increasing by about 10% annually since 2016, ranking Illinois at 7th overall in the United States for this sector. Illinois has stayed on pace with the rest of the United States in terms of its growth rate since 2016 in life sciences at around 5% annually. While increases at 3.6% annually in engineering research didn't quite keep pace with the US growth of 4.7% since 2016. Social science research in the state has declined pretty significantly over the last few years, especially in psychology, as has research funding for computer and information sciences in Illinois, partially due to the winding down of the National Center for Supercomputing Applications partnership with UIUC, that concluded this past year. Despite this loss, Illinois continues to rank 8th overall in the amount of university R&D in computer and information sciences in the United States. Next slide, please. And this graphic displays activity at our national labs in Illinois. In both Argonne and Fermilab have continued to be hotbeds for R&D activity, even as the pandemic has surged. As we can see here, overall funding to the labs in Illinois increased slightly overall, with Argonne receiving about $49 million in allocations from 2019 to 2020. Unfortunately, Fermilab has seen a decline in funding by about $34 million since 2019, which continues a trend that started in 2011. Despite these funding gaps, Fermi and their team have still managed to push forward and do more with less. They have recently parlayed their historical and truly monumental success in particle physics research into some new exciting opportunities within quantum, material science, and supercomputing. What's happening at Argonne is equally exciting. Argonne National Laboratories received the 6th highest nominal amount of funding among all FFRDCs from business partnerships in 2020. These partnerships covered 1.73% of total R&D funding at Argonne in 2020, a little bit higher than the national average rate of 0.74%. The $859.7 million spent at Argonne in the most recent data year represents a 6% increase from 2019. And since 2016, spending on research there has increased by 4.1% annually. Next slide, please. And this is our inputs and outputs graph for the meshing of all of these areas, which is what we view industry-university collaborations as. And in 2019, which is our most recent data year for the national patterns of R&D resources provided by the National Science Foundation, $169 million was passed through to universities for research from businesses. This total does not include any gifts or other contributions by businesses, and instead only includes sponsored research partnerships in 2019. Illinois has actually outpaced the national average on the amount of support in-state universities are able to draw from businesses. And in 2018, we set a new record of $179 million in these pass-throughs, and 2019's total represents just $10 million under that record high amount. Although the number of shared grants is down, I wouldn't put too much stock in the rate changes, as this number is fairly volatile given the limited number of shared grants listed in the Wellspring database, which is where we draw those shared grant numbers from. These collaborations were able to produce impressive results for 2020, as can be seen in the output section. Both co-assigned patents and co-authored research increased from 2019 to 2020, though Illinois fell in both of those rankings since 2016 due to the rapid rise of some other states in these categories. All right, next slide, please. That will conclude the data segment. And before I turn it over to our panel, I did want to give a quick shout out to the data partners that make this index happen. We could not have completed this without the assistance of the National Science Foundation, the Wellspring Data Scout platform, the Strategy and Group, who provided a great listing of the top 1,000 companies in R&D, and the Autumn Stat database. Next slide, please. And I also wanted to extend a thank you to all of our colleges, universities, and labs and companies that are funders and partners of ours in this process. I'd especially like to give a thanks to our 3 presenting sponsors for today's event, the Illinois Institute of Technology, Rosalind Franklin University, and Horizon Therapeutics. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to our incredible panel and moderator for our panel, Laura Appenzeller, who is the director of the Research Park at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and also IST's board chair. Thank you very much, Laura. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Austin. I really enjoyed seeing the data today and working with the team on investigating more of what's happening in research and development in Illinois. So we hope that you enjoyed seeing more of those details. And we're going to dig in with a panel today of experts across a number of the domains that we just described. So I'm going to do brief introductions, I think, for each of you, and to let you tell a little bit about your roles in your organizations. And then we'll dive into some of the categories we just heard and some of the excellence that's happening in research and development in Illinois and in Chicago. So first I'll go to Megan. Megan's from Argonne, as we heard that there are 2 large federal research labs in the state of Illinois that drive a lot of our research at Argonne and Fermi, and exciting collaborations that are happening at both of those places, and actually other federal labs across the state that are not as large, but important in our research efforts as well. Megan plays an important role in driving collaborations and partnerships. So I think it's fitting to maybe go to her first and just talk a little bit more about Argonne and what's been happening. So what we also heard is that Argonne has had record expenditures. So congratulations to Argonne in the report's data as well. As we heard, $860 million in research expenditures in 2020, a new record. Megan, tell us more about Argonne and your role.
Well, thank you, Laura, and good morning and good afternoon, perhaps, to some of you. It's great to be here today. It's my pleasure. Just a correction, I saw the slide promoted me to laboratory director here at Argonne. That is not the case. I am an associate laboratory director over science and technology partnerships and outreach. And that includes the commercialization functions of the lab, all our licensing and tech transfer, as well as our entrepreneurship program, Chain Reaction Innovations, our STEM education and workforce development programs, and a variety of other things. I think of it as the business arm of the lab that I oversee. So it's really a privilege and a pleasure. And boy, oh boy, are we seeing a lot of opportunity. I loved Raj's message saying innovation is a message of hope. And what we're seeing happening in terms of congressional laws putting forth money in innovation, it is a really special time for us, and one that we all need to come together and make sure we're partnering to really capitalize on those dollars that will be flowing to states, to research institutions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, Laura. I'll let the rest of the panel get through their introduction. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it. And sorry we had your title wrong, but the spirit of the work you do is really important, as we said. So again, Associate Lab Director for Science and Technology Partnerships and Outreach at Argonne. Next, I'm going to talk with another person that works on partnerships and outreach, and that's Michelle Hoffman. There's been a new effort since we last had an index in the Chicago Biomedical Innovation Alliance. In the data we heard today, the leading category of research in the state of Illinois is in biomedical research. And that's driven by a lot of our university partners, our vibrant academic medical centers, and leading corporations that are working on advancements in medical innovations. Michelle's trying to bring that together in Chicago. Tell us more about your role in this new organization and its partners.
Sure. Thank you so much for that introduction, Laura. So I just need to correct a few things. So first off, we are not the Chicago Biomedical Innovation Alliance. That is a separate organization that is spearheaded.
Biomedical Consortium. Sorry.
I just wanted to make sure. So, and then also, so I'll talk a little bit about the CBC. So the CBC has actually been around since 2006. We are generously underwritten by the Chicago Community Trust and Kinship. And really the way that we started was to bring researchers at the 3 big R1 universities in Chicago together. So this is University of Illinois, Chicago, University of Chicago, Northwestern. It's been a long time, since 2006, even though I still feel like it's 1998. And I've recently stepped in since fall of this year to really help grow the organization. So it's done wonderful jobs bringing scientists together, convening them, funding them, and also training them. And what we're looking to do, just because of the way that ecosystem is evolving in Chicago, is really bring more universities under the tent and make sure that we're linking our academic community to the commercial infrastructure that exists outside of the universities. So really making sure that we can have a seamless transition from some of the great work that's being done in our universities to establishing that economic opportunity outside of our universities. So I sit with 1 foot inside the university and 1 foot outside. And I'm really excited. Again, our biggest natural resources are the professors and trainees that exist in our universities. And so we're really excited to make sure that Illinois feels the impact and the benefit of those natural resources.
Thanks, Michelle. Sorry about that. And she also came from P33 before, which has been another catalyst in the city in Chicago and strengthening different sectors where we can grow. So in the state of Illinois, we do play a leadership role in R&D. The state of Illinois, as we heard, is one of the 10th strongest states for R&D. And in the top 10 states, they account for nearly 3/4 of all business R&D in the United States, actually. So there's a heavy concentration amongst those 10 states. And within different communities across the United States, there's been an increased composition of that work happening in large metropolitan areas. And Chicago is among the top 10 cities in the US for R&D. Lisa from World Business Chicago will tell us a little bit more about how the city of Chicago is attracting businesses and growing R&D sectors. We'll come back maybe, Lisa, and talk a little bit more about food and ag later. But if you could talk maybe more broadly about your role at World Business Chicago and how that organization grows our business community.
Good morning, Laura. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to represent the organization. ISTC is an important partner to our efforts, so thank you for having us. So Lisa Deacon, Vice President of Business Development with World Business Chicago, which is the city's economic development partner. We work broadly on a global stage to position Chicago for jobs and investment, and that can look like very broadly working on an ecosystem level to help sort of create the systems that encourage that kind of investment, all the way down to working with specific companies. And perhaps we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of those wins. One of the shifts that we've made under our new leadership with Michael Fosnot over the last year is to really doing a deeper dive on key sectors that we see as opportunities for both Chicago and Illinois to win in. And so those sectors, many of which Austin, touched on in the data that was developed or presented earlier, those are food and ag tech, life sciences and healthcare innovation, transportation, distribution, and logistics, manufacturing, and soon to be announced, you'll hear it here, is fintech and financial services. And these are areas where we push our efforts at a deeper level in connecting with partners to grow these opportunities.
Thanks, Lisa. And next panelist will be Chuck from Duality, and he's at the University of Chicago. But Duality launched in April last year as the nation's first quantum accelerator. And this is an area, Lisa talked about finance, but it's not limited to quantum computing. It's one of the areas of application, but there's a lot of exciting growth really at the forefront of computing happening in quantum. The initial partners to make this possible included the University of Chicago, Polsky Center, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, P33, Argonne, and numerous other partners that have joined in as well. But it's also part of the Chicago Quantum Exchange efforts that have really been putting our city and our state in a leadership role in quantum computing. Chuck, tell us more about quantum computing, perhaps, and how the University of Chicago, Duality, CQE, and its partners are looking to lead.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. So first of all, I would like to congratulate the ISTC team for such a fantastic report. And then moving on to quantum, as you said, there are many broad areas in which there is research going on and the technologies that the industry is looking for. Quantum computing is perhaps the biggest one that all of us read about all the time. And it's about chasing perhaps the biggest performance boost in the history of technology, and also the ability to solve different kinds of challenges that were not possible today. Duality works with all the organizations that you mentioned. We bring in early stage quantum startups from all over the world that are commercializing quantum innovation. So we work with the broad ecosystem, throughout the world to help these startups scale. And then in Illinois, organizations like CQE are at the forefront in terms of bringing in different partners to advance research, to advance workforce development. In addition, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has also been the recipient of large federal grants, both from DOE and NSF, again, to advance science. And Duality really works with them to bring all of this to the marketplace.
Well, thanks, Chuck. So one of the partners, as I had said, with Duality is Argonne. And I thought I'd go back to Megan and talk a little bit about why Argonne's been growing its research and some of the collaborations that have taken place. Duality is just one of them. And quantum computing and computing overall, I'll say, has been a growth opportunity for Argonne, but also a lot of work in clean tech. Megan, can you tell us a little bit more about some of these specific types of partnerships, especially those that include other institutions in Illinois or business partners?
Happy to, Laura. And just to add to what Chuck said, in addition to the University of Illinois receiving that NSF grant, both Argonne and Fermilab were awarded one of the quantum centers. So there's 5 in the country and we each have one. So how special is Illinois that they've got 2 quantum centers funded at about $115 million over 5 years to really push forward that research in quantum. So I think we've got a real budding ecosystem here in quantum for Chicagoland and Illinois and perhaps the region more broadly. And, so I'm excited. I think Duality and other pieces being a part of that are really important. Another thing that we're really known for, and, I don't know how much this is out there, but I see Argonne as really the nation's leader in energy storage and battery research. And this has been 10 years in the running through our Joint Center for Energy Storage Research, also funded by Department of Energy. And, these collaborations, similar to QNext, are multiple partners involved. So with QNext, we have 9 university partners, 3 of which are here in the state. With J. Caesar, as we call it, the Joint Center for Energy Storage Research, we have 150 researchers across 18 different institutions working to really advance battery technology and energy storage. And some of those inventions and innovations that get into the market end up being in, for instance, the Chevy Bolt and Bolt is, those cars are driving around with our technology in them. And so it's there, but it doesn't have the Argonne inside sort of branding on it. But it really is important, I think, to the broader ecosystem. And so when I think about clean tech, I do think that both batteries and energy storage are going to be really instrumental to driving forward that clean technology revolution. There's also some exciting things happening right now in Illinois as we pursue for one of the new funding opportunities coming out of the American Rescue Plan. And that is with the Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. They've been given an additional $3 billion in supplemental funds to really help the country recover economically from the pandemic. And one of those programs is called the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. It's $1 billion of that. And so under MHUB's leadership, Illinois has gotten organized to put forth a clean tech economy coalition with 19 partners and a broader set of partners across the region to really put our best foot forward in receiving one of those grants that could be up to $100 million in value for the state of Illinois. So we're very excited about that. There's a lot of movement around clean energy technology. I won't belabor this, but I do want to talk a little bit later, Laura, about the bipartisan infrastructure law that really does look at infrastructure, both the physical infrastructure and repairs that are really have been needed for decades, as well as the clean tech economy for the future.
Thanks, Megan. There's a lot of federal funding that is available, and more hopefully with better advocacy that we can gain in the innovation sector as well. And we hope that Illinois continues to be a winner. And that often happens through the types of collaborations Megan just described. I'm going to go back to Michelle and talk more about life sciences and specifically biomedical advances. This report's going to talk about the role of the pandemic as well. And While that was a challenge for many things, I think it also just showed the incredible performance of many different aspects of our R&D community in the state of Illinois. And from the national news that Abbott was making in having diagnostics that can help us at home and in clinical settings have fast results, to AbbVie becoming the #1 leader in the state of Illinois for R&D, with now $5 billion in R&D expenditures since they formed in 2013, and many of our medical enterprises having groundbreaking clinical trials, testing, and other accomplishments. I hope that that's an exciting thing for Michelle. It's for you to build upon an innovation economy. Tell us some of the thoughts that you've had of points of pride in Chicago and Illinois that you want to describe a little bit more about.
Thank you for that, Laura. I think, obviously the entire country was gripped and continues to still be gripped by COVID, but I am particularly proud and excited about what we did as a scientific community when COVID hit. There are numerous examples of different institutions and organizations rising to that challenge, but I just want to call out a few. So first and foremost, our own homegrown Abbott. Without diagnostics, we've seen what can happen and how levels can just become skyrocketing, and there's just really no hope of dampening down the caseload. And so Abbott really rose to the challenge with multiple modalities of tests, from their PCR tests to their serology tests, so being able to look at antibodies for COVID, and then finally with their ID Now rapid tests. And these tests are, there are different companies that do this, including a lot of their competitors. But I think time and time again, when we looked at the literature, Abbott's tests were the best, if not among the best. And as FDA was giving emergency use authorizations to multiple molecular tests, I know that I was both proud as well as reassured when I myself was using an Abbott test, especially the ID Now. And then I think, what is amazing about Abbott is that they didn't stop there. So in terms of what they're doing, they launched in 2021 in collaboration with some of the universities here, the Abbott Pandemic Defense Coalition. So really what this is looking at what happened with COVID and understanding that this is going to happen again. So they've done this amazing thing. They're partnering with 5 different continents, NGOs, governments, et cetera, to really get a public-private partnership where they can get samples from the outer areas where these viruses occur and make sure that we're constantly surveying the environment. And really the idea here is to make sure that we don't get caught unaware like we did with COVID. I also want to call out in terms of what else we've done in COVID. So again, the universities really came together. So as a CBC, I will just give a shout out to my organization where, when COVID hit, we restructured all of our programs and said, the award money that we use for awards during business as usual, we're going to actually chunk out in $500,000 increments to multidisciplinary and multi-institution groups. So we gave 3 $500,000 awards to different groups. They spanned many of the universities in the ecosystem, and they've all done amazing work. But I do want to just point out that one particular group managed to take that work and apply for a $75 million grant. It's from the NIH. It is industrial scale collaboration between Northwestern, Feinberg, Argonne, UIC, University of Chicago, as well as industry, Takeda, to really look for novel antivirals as we continue to combat this pandemic as well as others that come after. Finally, just in terms of COVID, I do want to also point out that the Walder Foundation really, as did all the foundations in town, they really thought ahead of, how can we get ahead again, of surveillance. And so Walter funded a number of initiatives, but I do want to call out the wastewater initiative. So they're working with Argonne, they're working with DPI, UIC, Northwestern University, and really being able to do that early wastewater detection of COVID levels that's allowed other cities like Boston and Paris to really gird themselves before another wave hits. So I could keep talking about COVID, but I'll just stop there and see if you have any other questions or anything else you want me to call out.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll say we have about 10 more minutes with our finalists. And I know I still have questions and topics I want to get through, but if somebody wants to use the Q&A feature, feel free to do that. Next, Lisa, I thought I'd talk food and ag with you. It's near and dear to my heart down here in Champaign-Urbana, where we're very proud of accomplishments that have happened in ag tech. But all across the state of Illinois, there are really examples of excellence. So in Chicago, there's been a lot of growth, as you said, a core sector here. I want to talk about some of the companies from ADM to Mondelez to Kraft Heinz that call Chicago home as one of the food capitals of the world, a commodities trading capital of the world, but also things that are happening across the state. So here at the University of Illinois, we won on AI farms and research. So how is AI being applied to agriculture? ADM down in Decatur has been working with the University of Illinois on carbon capture, which relates to maybe Megan's discussions of clean tech being important in Illinois. They've been able to capture more than 1 million tons of carbon dioxide that's taken out of those ADM plants and put in the ground, and had more than 2,000 visitors from 30 countries to see that as an example. So we're doing really pioneering things. In Moline, Illinois, we've got John Deere. They have an office here that works on research in Champaign and newly opening a big location in Chicago. Lisa, tell us more about your thoughts, food and ag, the opportunities. They really are all across the state. And I could point out numerous more communities that are doing amazing work in this field.
Thanks, Laura. I think you really set a nice framework for the type of activity that Illinois is seeing across the state. And within Chicago, food and ag has been a strong sector historically. We have really strong corporate partners, as you noted. And then increasingly, we have a really strong startup and innovation sector that look for the opportunities to connect with those corporate partners. And Chicago has a nice network of innovation hubs that both serve the food and ag sector, as well as some of those other sectors that I spoke of. But as example, within the food sector, you have the hatchery on Chicago's near west side, where you have the opportunity for that collaboration to happen with corporate partners such as Tyson Foods over there, and the startups that co-locate together in that space. So you have the opportunity for that innovation to happen across partners. We've had some interesting announcements recently in Chicago. You spoke about some of the work that's happening in other areas of the state. In Chicago, I know that Blommer just announced a new innovation center at the Mart. And I think that, builds on the reporting that was shared, I think a week or 2 weeks ago in Cranes, talking about, why does Chicago see an increase in these innovation hubs that are happening, across the city, and how does that impact the state more regionally? You have stories like Hazel Technologies. We heard from IIT, Hazel Technologies launched out of IIT's incubator space. And it's a success story because we did not lose Hazel as they grew and needed more space, but instead we were able to capture them and keep them here in the ecosystem. And that's a part of our efforts, really working to make the ecosystem stickier, if you will. We have companies like Nature's Fine, which is, growing gangbusters. So a lot of examples of companies, both startups and corporates, and the collaboration that's happening across those areas, and the resulting success that's happening in Chicago. And we're seeing, a lot of the business development conversations happening in that sector. So we're excited to see where the future holds there.
Lisa, pun fully intended, but we need to have the right ingredients to put the innovation together in a number of these sectors, whether it's food or life sciences or another area I'll talk with Chuck about. But one of the things that was accomplished in the last year was the state finally funding wet lab infrastructure. Michelle and Lisa, feel free to jump in if you want. I know this has been a point of advocacy, not only for ISTC, iBio, WBC, and others. We've worked on it for years. And this year, the state of Illinois announced awards to IIT. Raj may have mentioned this. Their work in food is also leading. They have some of the areas that you can do containment of viruses at IIT. Southern Illinois University Carbondale won. They're doing amazing work in fermentation, food, and wine. If you don't know that, that's a cool place to go see what's happening. SIU Edwardsville working on fermentation, as well as new areas that they're going to build in life sciences, and our research park. But labs are needed. Michelle, I'm just kind of go maybe back to you or Lisa. Lisa, it's certainly a growth area in the city of Chicago where we're seeing if you are a research company and you're in life sciences, you need labs in many cases to do that work. I'll let either of you maybe address that and its importance.
Yeah, so the thing that I want to say is I think, you know, as somebody that, like I said, I have 1 foot in the university and 1 foot outside. What we really need is lab space that is useful and cheap enough for university licensed spinouts to be able to afford it as a first stage. And that's what's so great about the governor's capital improvements, is that it enabled the different universities that are trying to cultivate more of these companies to be able to host them. And I think that in itself is extremely exciting. And then we have the graduation spaces as well. So I will let Lisa talk to that.
Lisa, maybe a little commercial for Portal Innovations or some of the other fun things that are happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That is an area where we've seen a lot of momentum. You know, Portal Innovations started at the first building of Fulton Labs and more than doubled their space now in the second building. And they are going gangbusters with not only sort of investing in companies, but housing companies that, you know, are locating there and co-locating with other entrepreneurs. AbbVie announced their AbbVie Innovation Midwest Awards last year. And I think the next round of that is coming up, where they invest in a couple of companies out of the Midwest that are housed at Portal Innovations. So there's some exciting opportunity happening with a lot of our innovation hubs in that space, including Portal and Matter and KHV and Prism Institute. There's no shortage of innovation happening in that space. In terms of lab space more generally, yes, finally, after a dearth of real estate, we have lab space that has delivered and is going to continue to deliver. Tremble Crow just delivered on their second building of Fulton Labs. Sterling Bay is getting ready to announce topping out of their Ally, thank you, Ally building, which is a part of Lincoln Yards. So we have other incubator space happening at the universities, which is a really important part of that puzzle that Michelle talked about. Biolabs announced their intention to enter the market so that we have flexible space for those companies that are launching out of our universities, all a part of keeping it or making what I would, you know, call a sticky ecosystem here in Illinois.
And one of those big announcements came from Northwestern University. I'll say shout out to Northwestern. It is the #1 university for R&D expenditures in the state of Illinois, and being able to have a place to foster those amongst the other places that already exist is a big investment that they're making. So I'm grateful to see that that's happening. Chuck, sorry, I'm going to go back to Chuck, Michelle, since we did a little life sciences. I want to talk back on a little bit of deep tech. And Chuck, the work at Duality really kind of is hard, because hard tech and deep tech is more challenging, perhaps. So is life sciences, I'll say. And the pieces that you need to put together are numerous to make those companies launch. I want you to say a little bit more about the type of companies. Even if they're in computing, they have a long way to go because they have other tentacles. We've been happy to work with you on SBIR funding. We got the Small Business Administration to support statewide efforts, and Duality is one of our partners that we've been working with. SIU was able to get some funding to support rural enterprises in downstate Illinois as well. Chuck, talk to us a little bit about deep tech, hard tech, why it takes longer. It needs some different stuff to make them launch.
Yeah, Laura, one of the underlying themes in all these areas that you just mentioned, life sciences, physical sciences, it's all about reducing the technical risk and the commercial risk. At the end of the day, the entire ecosystem that is supporting our startups, the duality startups, those are the two dimensions we are really focused on. So traditionally, if you take the newer battery technologies that are coming out, they are very technically very challenging, commercially very challenging. So traditionally, it has been harder to get funding, but many of the government institutions have stepped in to fund those in the initial stages. And there are some other amazing things that are happening by leveraging the quantum technology. So for example, the fertilizers we developed today using a process called Haber-Bosch process that was discovered in the 1900s, early 1900s. They're responsible for 1 to 2% of global energy consumption and 1.4% of CO2 emissions. With quantum capabilities, we can really make an impact on all those, reducing the energy consumption, reducing the CO2 emissions. So there again, the startups that we are working with today, they, for example, like you mentioned very recently, one of our startups, Supertech, they received a phase 2 SBIR award, $1.65 million in funding for them to really optimize the entire stack, all the way from the hardware to the software. And they really were successful because of the support they got from everyone. Many of you actually helped Supertech in achieving that goal. One of our other startups, Great Lakes Crystal Technologies, they got awarded 3 SBIRs just in the phase of 1 or 2 months. So there is a lot of innovation happening. Our startups, when you look at mature big tech companies like Google, Amazon, they typically spend about 10 to 15% on R&D. Whereas startups that we deal with, early stage startups, they spend over 50% of their revenues on R&D. So there is a lot more to come. Many of these startups are working in some wonderful areas that will impact the way we live and work. Better Netflix recommendations, better batteries for long-range travel, efficient, and designs for cars, for example. So I'm just thrilled to see all the great things that will come out of these startups.
Thanks, Chuck. I'll say on behalf of us collectively, we already said this, but we hope the state funds, we know they authorized our SBIR match in the state, so we want to remain as competitive as possible. And all these startups that are coming out of R&D, we hope will get the benefit of what other states have on the table, which is match. So for those that are in touch with the state, including ISTC as an organization, this is an area that we hope will come to fruition soon. So we're a little over time on our panel, and I'd like to open it back up to Q&A if there are any questions from participants for either the ISTC team, and thanks Austin and Colleen and all those involved in our report. If you want to ask them or any of the panelists, feel free to do that now. Otherwise, I'll come back, and I know there's no shortage of thoughts amongst this crew to add to thoughts on R&D as we wrap up. Colleen, Austin, any questions you wanted to ask the group? Or if not, I'll maybe, we've got a couple of minutes, allow out some closeout statements and thoughts from the panelists.
Yep, thanks, Laura. I do not see any questions. So I think some closing statements from everyone would be awesome. And I want to say thank you to everyone on this call today. We had a couple hiccups, but like anything else, we just keep powering through. So thank you very much for that. And Laura, pass it off for closing remarks.
Okay, well, I think all of us probably have a little bit to say, but I would like to use this as a spirit of collaboration to talk about the partners that exist across the state of Illinois of really being assets that we can leverage. We talked about pursuit of federal funding. It's incredibly important to many of our organizations, and working together, we're stronger. So we heard a number of themes today, from clean tech to food and ag to life sciences, to computing and quantum that hopefully will stick with you as some of the wonderful opportunities for us to use our R&D strength and might to build new companies and to make our institutions stronger. I'll give it back to the floor of others that want to say a little bit more about where you think we're heading in a state in terms of R&D and some of the ingredients we can put together to make us even better.
I'll jump in, Laura. I want to echo your point about collaborations. I think part of the opportunity and the challenge ahead is sort of breaking down the silos that we as stakeholders sometimes operate in, whether that be, economic development entities like WBC or universities or the national labs, our corporate partners, our startups. Our strengths is in our collaborations. And I think that is an area that you'll see more, more emphasis from our organization is just to continue to act that role as of convener. We are certainly excited about the opportunities that lie ahead. And I would also echo your point about the SBIR funding match. I think, organizations like ISTC and iBio have done a lot of work there to lay the groundwork. And I think, putting that in motion, as well as looking at the R&D tax credit to make sure that we are really supporting this type of activity in the state will be important initiatives.
And thanks, Lisa. I do see in the chat, my friend Kathy Brown from Peoria asking about impact downstate. So I did try to give some references to that amongst our different corporate partners that are doing exemplary work. Since you're in Peoria, I will give the shout out that again, that Caterpillar listed in our report as the top leader in patents, but also the role, as we talked about, of the innovation ecosystem. Some of those awards on wet labs did go downstate, but we are building with the Illinois Innovation Network locations with incubators to build new technology all throughout the state. That includes in places like Peoria, in Springfield, in Bloomington Normal, in Carbondale, in Champaign-Urbana, in Edwardsville, and other places where we can hopefully inspire and support our innovation communities all across Illinois. And I know just this past week, there was a great event around ag in Morton, Illinois, outside of Peoria. Peoria does have one of the national labs that's not on this call, but one of the USDA labs where they've had breakthroughs for almost 100 years, I think. So there are all kinds of players that can come together, as we just heard, and really provide strength. Okay, and if anybody else wants to touch on that, feel free to do so. Megan, back to maybe your closing thoughts.
Thank you. I'll jump in here because I agree with exactly what both you and Lisa said. It's really about relationships. And so making sure that we've got those strong relationships built, and that takes time. But just looking at Southern Illinois University and how that relationship has really come together as part of the Clean Tech Economy Coalition, that's just one example. And, certainly through these federal dollars that are going to be flowing, and it's billions of dollars, the infrastructure law is 1.2 trillion. I get my millions, billions, and trillions mixed up because these numbers are just so, high. They are going to be looking for partnerships, and they're going to be looking for us to make investments and build partnerships with underserved communities. So that's going to be a really important component of all of this. So I'll just end with a big congratulations to ISTC on the release of their report. It's wonderful to have the index out, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here today.
Thanks, Megan. So I do see a question, so I'll go to Chuck for maybe the next statement. But Chuck, if somebody wants to participate in the Quantum Accelerator, I think applications are still being accepted for the next cohort. That's certainly big numbers and big math too of what you're able to inspire. Chuck?
Yeah, so I just posted a link with the details of applying, so please take a look. We are accepting applications for cohort 2 until March 25th. We have info sessions throughout, so the link I posted will give you all that information. What I would love to say in a closing statement is, in addition to the great R&D that is going on here, the Illinois ecosystem has many other complementary aspects that make the R&D very impactful. So for example, we have 30, I think over 30 Fortune 500 companies here. We have 90 plus investors, venture active VCs. All of that, makes us a very vibrant ecosystem. Duality itself, we have brought in over 20 corporations to work with our startups, over 30 venture capitalists again to work with startups, and we have over 40 mentors from all over the world, diverse group of mentors supporting our startups. So please, if you have any ideas that can use quantum technologies and impact our lives, you are welcome to apply. We are ready to help you succeed.
So I just saw a comment in the chat. I'll say, don't relocate. The state of Illinois is a great place. We hope that we inspired you today to see the great things that are happening across Illinois as a robust place that has not only rich R&D, but supportive environment for innovation and startup companies. If you'd like to get more involved, I'd like to encourage you to be part of the Illinois Science and Tech Coalition. It's a wonderful organization that crosses many of the topics we talked about today. Colleen's going to wrap us up as our CEO, who's done a great job leading this work, and maybe we'll give you some next steps of things that you can do to participate.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And I just wanted to let everyone on participating today that the index will be sent out. It'll be on our website by the end of the week. And if you want to participate in any of our programming, you can find us at www.istcoalition.org. And I thank you again so much. Our panelists, our speakers, our moderator, my board chair, Laura Eppenzeller, we couldn't do any of this work without you. Thank you. And everyone have a great day.